Hello and welcome to another episode of Who's Coming to Dinner, the episode of Casting Views where I get a guest on and, well, ask them exactly that, who's coming to dinner. This time around, I have got fairly regular voice on the show now, or it should be at least a known voice to you all. I have got Griffin from the Reboot Deboot podcast. So, hi Griffin, how are you doing?
Hey Dan, how are you?
I am very good. At time of recording, our Oasis episode has just been out for about 4 or 5 days now, and I have been getting a lot of really nice comments about it, and predominantly because of you. So I have to say thank you for giving me a proper grilling on all things Oasis. Yeah, it was a different episode, and I think what comes across is just your passion for certain subjects, like music, for instance.
I am only as good as the people I am speaking to, Dan. So thank you for indulging me on that idea. But I mean, yeah, you doomed yourself when you said Oasis was your favorite band. So,
well, it has also given me an idea for another sub-series of episodes, which I'm going to get my mind to work on, and at some point, hopefully, it'll see the light of day. We're not talking Oasis now. Well, you never know, we might be. I've got you on for the dinner party episode because we've wiped your mind.
yes.
And I love these episodes because, again, it's just another way of getting into the mind of the guest, right? I just think it's fascinating. Before we kind of really get stuck into that, how's all your works going? Because I know, you are a very busy chap. So you've got your podcast, you've got your streaming, which I know you're doing a lot of recently. You know, you've got your artistic endeavors that you do outside of both of those
Sure.
kind of contacts. So, yeah, so how's life for Griffin lately?
Honestly, I never really have time to stop and think about it. I'm constantly spinning these artistic plates. So in the month of November on stream, I started a book and I finished it, like writing.
Oh, yeah. I saw your
So
tweets. Yeah.
that is a book of quotes that I wrote, but it's also about the nature of quotes. And if anyone says anything, then technically it's a quote. So I kind of break down some famous quotes, or I kind of poke holes in them, or it is a book of quotes about quotes. So that's being edited currently. I'm also finishing a horror collection, my second horror collection, and I had another. I'm writing a series of short stories that I think might be an anthology, but I don't know. Outside of that, streaming is going really well. I just finished a stream about an hour ago, maybe a little less, like 45 minutes. I did about 4 hours on that, and it ended up in tears. And then the podcast tomorrow, Reboot Deboot, comes back. We've been away for a month, and we have a special episode with a special guest surprise on that episode. And we're talking about Dune. All things
Really?
Dune. Yeah, so it's going to be, we had a month. And finally, I was like, well, we have a big swath of time, so let's cover Dune. So we're starting with the book, to the 84 movie, to the 2000 miniseries, to the new set of movies. So it's going to be a longer of an episode, but it's also trying to cover one of the most prolific science fiction endeavors I think ever penned.
Wasn't it a book that could never be filmed, wasn't it?
Initially, yeah. And then they've tried at least 3 times, and anyone trying to take that on, cinematically speaking, I have to give credit to, because of how ambitious of a project it is.
Yeah, do you know what? This is going to probably sound bad, but I've not seen any of the Dune franchise or.
Oh, neither have I. This is my.
Oh, really?
Because I'm not a sci-fi guy. I really don't like sci-fi.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
because of how popular Dune is, I knew, Fear is the Mind Killer. I knew Walk Without Rhythm, and I know The Spice Must Flow, just because of how, like, pop culturally aware that stuff is. But I've never seen Dune. I'm definitely not going to read Dune. So I blank slate. So I was watching Dune, and I'm like, oh, now I get why people say this is Star Wars. And then every iteration, I'm like, man, every piece of science fiction is just Dune. Like, everything that exists in any science fiction thing just started in Dune. It's all just Dune shit. Like, from Tremors, Stargate, Star Wars, Star Trek, it's all Dune. It's just all Dune. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about how prolific that he just had, and then it gave birth to so many other ideas and adaptations and other writers and creative venture. Like The Matrix is inspired by Dune, and it's insane.
All I know about the first one, the original, is isn't Sting in it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sting is. So I knew that too. I knew Sting was in it, and then watching the movie, I'm like, one, this is a very strange role for Sting. He's not in it as much as you think. Because I was like, oh, Sting's in it. I'm thinking he's the main character. No. He has like 2 minutes on screen here, 5 minutes on screen there, a very random fight scene at the end, but he's also like 80% naked the entire time. It's very uncomfortable to see Sting in just like a futuristic mankini and then like oiled down. It made me really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing about Dune as well is, I've said this about a number of things, is it feels like an IP that I would love, but at the same time, because I love I love these stories and these films that have got a lot of lore, a lot of stories, a lot of background. But at the same time, I always say the word intimidated, and it's probably not the right word, but I'm always, or apprehensive is the word, to want to get sucked into this. How do I get into this? And am I then going to fall down a rabbit hole of wanting to read everything and see everything? I have quite an addictive personality to certain things. And I do, like I said, I love these worlds that are crafted with a lot of depth and information in there.
I can understand that. I mean, that's kind of the reason why we never did Dune, because I know I'm like, fuck, it's like 6 books, and then there's a movie that's like 2.5 hours, and there's a mini series that's 5 hours, and then the new movies are like 2.5 hours each. And so I'm like, I know Dune is massive and big, and I know it's this big thing, but the easiest way to start, it's the same way you start a novel. Just start. Everything else will fall into place. And honestly, again, the original Dune from the 80s, it's a 2.5 hour movie. That's not daunting. It is weird considering how ham-fisted, like, I get it's David Lynch, and I understand there's a lot of talent and screenwriting that happened there, but to try and squash the entirety of Dune into one 2.5 hour movie, it's not. There were so many things that I was confused by. I'm like, I don't get any of this, and I understand even less about the decisions they made artistically speaking. Like, there's an annoying thing they do in that original movie where a lot of it is just voiceover narration, because they're trying to take these big ideas and like, we got to give it to the audience really quickly. And I'm like, is that a thing they do in the books? And then I watch the others. I'm like, oh no, they're absolutely just filling for time. And the miniseries isn't bad. It came out in 2000. It looks like a sci-fi, like made for TV series. Not bad. And then the new movies, honestly, for someone who's not into sci-fi, I was really impressed. And I was like, man, I should have seen these in theaters. Like, these feel like I need to see them on the big screen to fully appreciate it. So I might go see Dune Part 3 in 2026. I might.
See, I didn't realise there was an old TV series as well, because I think there's a new one just come out as well, isn't there? But I didn't realise there was an old one.
The old one is actually Dune, and the new one is called Dune Prophecy, which is a prequel to everything.
Oh, okay.
So there, in the world of Dune, there's this like religious cult called the Bene Gesserits, and they're really obsessed with this idea of like selective breeding and eugenics to try and create this demigod. Dune Prophecy takes place with the start of this cult and that process, because in Dune it's taking place 10,000 years in the future, and the Bene Gesserits are already in like every influential house, and their plans are already in motion, and it's a whole thing. And Prophecy is how that started.
I'm just thinking about this now. So when was the original film? Was it 80s? Was it
84?
And not having seen it, I'm not saying it's a bad film, but the fact that they remade it or they're redoing them now, do you think certain films were just made at the wrong time? Did it do it justice in the 80s, or did it need to be a 2020 franchise?
I honestly, I'm going to say this tomorrow, and I stick by this. I think the remake actually looks better now. Movie making has changed so much, and audiences are thanks to Marvel movies and Titanic, we don't have a problem sitting through a 3-hour movie. So for Dune to be like Dune Part 1, 2.5 hours, Dune Part 2, 2.5 hours, Dune Part 3, 2.5 hours, audiences eat that up now. We are expecting big, long, arcing cinematics. And in the 80s, it was kind of a different story. So you're taking all these big concepts. Well, there's a galactic war going on, and there's political intrigue, and there are like these three different factions, and all of their stories are interweaving. We're going to compact all of that into one 2.5 hour movie. And it's you're like so much of the movie, the '84 one that I watched. I'm like, I follow this all, but there's no like, why are they suddenly in love? It seems like they've been together for, and like, why is this kid now born? And because in the book it takes place over the course of years.
Yeah.
And so they kind of tell that out even in the miniseries in 2000. It's 3 episodes. Each episode is an hour and a half. It still does a better job at saying this is taking a place over years as opposed to 1 2 hour thing that makes it feel like, oh, this is like a week or whatever. Like the passage of time is really done poorly in the '84 one, but the '84 one I think is so great in its ambition. Like David Lynch had to swing for the fences because to take that on, I mean, it should have been Spielberg and it should have been Lucas and like it had to have the biggest sci-fi names blowing the biggest sci-fi budget on this in '84, and it didn't. And I think it did the best as it could, but I also understand why it's universally panned.
It's also interesting, and again, listening to you and kind of like your passion for having seen this now, and especially the new installments, and it has got a huge cult following. I know that it's taken all this time. It's taken almost 40 years for it to resurface almost. I know you said there was the 2000
Right.
series. It's strange how it never rose up again, if you know what I mean.
I think I can't remember if it was I think it was Iron Man 2, where there's that clip where Tony Stark finds the video of his father, and he says, I am limited by the technology of my time. That's absolutely what Dune feels like. It felt like Dune has been limited until now, until we have good enough CGI, good enough budget to make this world and the effects that we're seeing somewhat believable. Again, it looked like I watch a lot of movies, Dan. I don't go to the movie theater very often because I don't feel the need to. I don't feel like there's a movie that grips me enough to, But Dune, I was watching it. I'm watching part 2 tonight.
Okay.
But I kind of want to go see it in theaters. Like, I think that seeing it on the big screen, like put me in an IMAX theater or something where like make it 3D almost, or because I feel like that's the way you're going to get the most out of the Dune experience. And I think that to the betterment of the film, it's being made now. And I'm gonna spoiler alert for tomorrow for anyone, but when it comes to Dune, keep rebooting it because technology is only going to get better, which means that Dune is only going to become more visually impressive.
It's funny you say that because about 10 minutes ago, I was actually thinking of asking you, who knows, in 20 years, it'll probably be rebooted and yeah, maybe we need to get you back out.
I'm sure I'll still be doing this podcast in some way, shape, or form.
But there's always going to be reboots.
Right, yeah, like they're talking about American Psycho is getting a remake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and my first question was why? And then thanks to Reboot Deboot, I remembered, right, nothing is sacred. Yeah. So I'm like, why wouldn't it be rebooted?
See, again, this is shocking. Like you, I tend not to go to the movies and therefore I'm usually quite a way behind. I've not seen American Psycho. It's not necessarily a film that shouts out to me, but what I do know about it is that it was well received and it is kind of well loved. So it does. Why would that be remade or rebooted? Yeah, it feels an odd one.
And this kind of sparked my idea for a sub show I'm doing. Reboot Deboot. We're going to enter a new stage called Reboot Preboot, and it's going to be over on Patreon for free. The idea is if you out there, or Dan, you yourself, if you think there is a movie that cannot be remade for whatever reason, we want you to come and talk about it on this sub show. Because I thought American Psycho couldn't be remade just because of how quirky and like a one-off experience it is, based off a novel, and Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman. It's this dark, it is a horror movie, but it's also incredibly satirical and dark comedy based around like the 80s fast money, like Wall Street, money never sleeps kind of vibe. It's based around yuppies and jaded New Yorkers. And the character of Patrick Bateman fits in this like shallow bubble, and it's really good. I would definitely watch American Psycho if you've never seen it. And if you have a certain kind of humor, you will think, oh, this is really funny, but it's really inappropriate to laugh at, but it's really funny. And so I'm like, well, what can't be remade? Because, Ben-Hur has been remade, but how come Casablanca hasn't been remade? How come The Wizard of Oz hasn't been remade? How come Schindler's List hasn't been remade? But Running Man is getting a remake. How come the original Terminator or the original Jurassic Park? What makes some of these movies untouchable, quote unquote, when there have been classics that have been remade over and over?
It's interesting because I can understand Dune being remade because we said about the effects and the CGI, etc., and the tech. And again, not having seen it, but it feels like American Psycho doesn't need to, unless it's, we're in different political times and social climates, maybe that if you set it in the modern day, there's something you can play off of that. But yeah, it's a fascinating sub-series that you're planning. And yeah, why? Yeah, like I said, Terminator feels like, I'm guessing that again, that doesn't need to be remade because the Terminator, there wasn't too much in the way of over the top effects, right? It was more that was more like a cat and mouse chase film almost, wasn't it? Like a
Sure.
tense psychological film almost. Then Terminator 2 came out and it was effects every other second, right?
Right. And Terminator 2 is still one of the greatest action movies ever made.
Yeah, I remember blowing me away, that film. It's great. And I think the effects still hold up now. Yeah.
They do. They absolutely do.
So we're going to keep diverging. Sorry,
right,
for me, the one that
it's...
always stands out in my head, and this is the thing with you, we will always diverge this conversation. You know, the bit where he's disguised as the tiled floor, the black and white tiled floor. That always stays in my mind, that, because I remember watching that, and that was the one scene I think that amazed me out of all of them. It was that.
I mean, the T-1000 is such a cool villain. If we're talking like really cool, iconic Hollywood villains, the T-1000 has to be up there.
Yeah.
And he's iconic, and everyone knows he's the cop, and looks great. And I had very mixed reactions because when the new Mortal Kombat game came out not too long ago, their first extended fighters was Conan the Barbarian and the T-1000. And there were two groups of people who were commenting on this. One half were like, oh, the T-1000, awesome. The other half were like, why is this random cop in a Mortal Kombat game? And then the first group were like, Dad, you need to put some respect. That is the... It's just a bunch of people who were too young to have seen Terminator 2.
I think that's a fascinating potential sub-series. So you after people that are saying... Yeah, so films that they think can't be remade and why.
Yeah. And I asked Marie from the Needed Roads podcast and Two Girls, One Podcast. I asked her, I was like, hey, do you have any? And she was like, can it be animated? So absolutely. We're taking TV shows, we're taking movies, animated, live action. If you think there's a movie that cannot be remade, maybe Pulp Fiction you think is a movie that can't be remade. Maybe a Wes Anderson movie. Maybe... if you think there's a movie that cannot be remade, get in contact with me. We will schedule, and I'd love to have you on the show.
Do you know what? Literally, one's just coming to mind. So once we stop talking,
sure.
Once we press stop on this, I'll talk to you. But I just need to make a note of it. Do you know what? I haven't got pen or paper to hand, so I'm going to put it in the chat here.
Sure.
No spoilers, okay?
Yeah, no spoilers. No spoilers.
Just putting it through to you now. I think that.
We definitely, yep.
Okay,
yep,
right.
No, no spoilers. Yep.
Right. Well, I think on that, look, we could be talking for 2 hours before we get stuck into the episode. So by the time I think this episode goes out, that new series may already have aired. But either way, please go subscribe to Reboot Deboot podcast. And do you want to just shout out your Twitch name as well?
I stream on Twitch every Monday through Thursday. You can find me at The Renegade Jester.
Please do follow Griffin over there as well. One of the nicest people in podcasting, honestly. Right. We're going to get into the main part of this podcast now. It's a dinner party, and I love this mainly because also I love hearing. I love food. I love hearing about food. I love talking food, and I love hearing what other people want to eat. And I've just eaten, which is always another bad thing I do. I normally record these a few hours after I've eaten, and it always makes me so hungry. So I think I should be okay now. The rules are all, as always, you're going to give me 3 courses, a starter, a main, and a dessert. There are 3 guests, and you're going to introduce one each. So you'll introduce a starter, why you've done that, why you've picked that starter, then the guest, why you've picked that guest. We'll keep going through till you've completed. Then I've got a few other questions that I'm going to throw at you. So yeah, let's start with the starter.
Okay, so out the gate, we're going to do caprese skewers.
Okay.
I think it's a little light, nice intro. It's like a caprese salad, but in a shish kebab format. So we're going to do blistered cherry tomatoes, some fresh mozzarella, sprinkled with a little bit of basil and a drizzled balsamic reduction, and then caprese salad leaves in between all that.
1, that's a classic starter. 2, obviously growing up as in an Italian family, that's won me over. And as you said, it's a lot of flavors. It's appealing to look at, but it's not too heavy, is it?
No, not at all. And that's that's part of it. I wanted it to be something light, something fresh, something easy. But because I like a dear drink, this is going to start accompanied by an alcoholic beverage. And maybe I'm a little morbid. Maybe it's my sense of showmanship. But along with our caprese skewers, we're going to have punch romaine. So punch romaine, there are multiple variations of how you make this. But the recipe I am going with is 6 cups of crushed ice, 2 cups of champagne or sparkling wine, 1 cup of white wine, 1/3 of fresh orange juice, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and 2 tablespoons of white rum with an orange peel on it.
That sounds quite refreshing.
It is. The macabre part is that punch romaine is also it was the first drink of the night on the last night of the Titanic that first class passengers were offered. But yeah, it's just a little light, something to, start your appetite.
I like the rum in it. I've become quite a big fan over recent years of rum. So, slight diversion here again. So, do you like having your cocktails or your mixed drinks? Do you like drinks like that?
Dan, yes, I do.
The smile on your face. If I could tell people the look that's come on Griffin's face.
I actually, for a stream, I want to do a bartending stream.
Okay, nice.
Because I have an idea about rum, and I would start off with the history of rum and a little bit about its importance to Britain, but also to America, because in the early 1700s, late 1800s, or early 1800s, there was a very important moment where rum was really crucial. It was used as bartering, it was used as currency, but it was also kind of everyday life. It kept your water clean. So there's a very specific drink that I'm very fond of that is rum-based. And I thought I could do a stream where I show the variations of the drink throughout time and kind of put modern twists on it. But I like whiskey, rum, gin, and I like wine. And when it comes to wine, if it's red, I'm going to drink single origin. I don't like blends of any kind, and that carries on. I don't drink blended whiskey. I'm going to drink single origin whiskey from either Scotland or Ireland, and it's got to at least be 10 years old if I'm buying for myself personally. Rum, I'm a little less hard-assed about rum. I'll drink white, I'll drink tropical, and usually with rum, the darker it is, the sweeter it is. So if I'm just going to do a on the rocks, I'll probably go for sweeter, darker rums. Aside from that, gin, I have no real... my snobbery ends there. With gin, I don't really have any. I do like mead. I'm also a mead guy. Okay. So, partake of that. And I'm trying to just get a refined palate all the time. Always getting a more refined palate.
Never be afraid to try something, right? That's the key. Yep. Yeah. Although that can get you in trouble. But yeah. So crazy salad, the punch romaine, and who I always keep. I forgot to say at the start. Obviously, I'm guest number 1 already, so I'm already. Made myself comfortable. You've given me some snacks. Who is the first guest other than me to come through the door?
So the second guest, Dan, would be. I don't know how people are going to feel about this, but it's going to be. We're going to be joined by Courtney Love. When you first told me I was throwing a dinner party, huge list. I had a list of about 100 names of people and dishes, and then I had to whittle them out. And I had two sets of names, and one of them was a very high concept list that didn't make a whole lot of sense, and it was very ethereal, but I had reasons for it. And then the other, I was like, okay, if that's ridiculous and gets rejected, I have to have a realistic list. So Courtney Love is on that list, and I love Courtney Love unabashedly. I think Courtney got a raw deal. I think she's still beat up over the death of Kurt, but I think that Courtney Love, if you get past the trauma, if you get past the clips of her being drunk and bombing a red carpet, or if you actually listen to her talk in her lucid moments, or you go back and you watch interviews where she's talking about music or she's talking about the industry, she outed Harvey Weinstein in 2004, which nuked her career. There's a very famous clip where she said, I probably shouldn't say this because it's going to kill my career, but if Harvey Weinstein invites you to a party at the Four Seasons, don't go. And then sure enough, her career got nuked. But Courtney Love, never scared to speak her mind, never scared to be herself, not apologetic about anything she's done. And in terms of like a musician's world or an artist's world, I think Courtney Love is just an amazing pillar of she is a punk rock princess with a heart of gold.
Fascinating choice in the sense of, as you said, everything she's been through and everything she's done as well, right? The story she's got. I mean, it's an odd one over here. I'm not going to say she wasn't known over here. Of course she was. But, and again, maybe this was back in the time before we had too much, or we didn't have as much TV as in channels, station,
Sure.
programming, socials, internet. Because you're right. I think from what I remember seeing, it was all quite negative clips of her, quite negative interviews. And like you said,
Sure.
when she was obviously intoxicated or under the influence or something. But, you look back at it and you think, well, what makes one celebrity or one person, we laugh at it and we say, oh, look, they're drunk again. Or, like we say that with a lot of actors. I remember Ollie Reed, he's
Sure.
always, the amount of shows.
Famous drunkard.
And then we laugh it off or we say, oh, that's just who he is. But with her, I think it was purely because I think that the love for Kurt Cobain and obviously what people were thinking about her after what happened to him. And yeah, that you got to wonder what she was obviously going through at the time as well. And it's funny how, when I say we, I don't mean you and I mean society pick and choose which celebrities' bad behavior is acceptable and isn't.
Right. And I support Courtney Love. I love that album she made, America's Sweetheart, and she's gearing up to make a new album. And from all accounts, she's getting every celebrity, like every musician under the sun to appear on it.
Oh, really?
So I'm very excited to see what comes of that. I think outside of the cameras, I think at a dinner party, I think Courtney Love could have a lot to say about music and about art and about her place in it and about how to exist in it and how to survive. And that's kind of the theme of this dinner party, which is I'm a starving artist, so I want to talk to other artists who have made it their own way, and I am looking for them to give me beacons, to give me a path. I will never tell anyone to live like I live. I am not a role model. I chose a very hard, very, very specific life. I don't have a conventional job. I have a podcast, I stream, and I write. That is not conventional. My paychecks are irregular, but I am addicted to this lifestyle. And I don't think anyone should ever become an artist. Find a job. Find a job that you go to, that you get a paycheck, and that you know when your next meal is coming from. Don't do what I'm doing. But if you do, it is the most rewarding thing on the planet because you are surviving by the skin of your own teeth, by your own hand. And it is my classic conversation of art versus commerce, right? So Courtney Love, she's going to come on in. She's going to be clear. And I think that she's going to have a lot to say about the industry and music and about art and the wider scale of things.
Yeah, and also, you know, we've got to remember at the time. Again, I will say over here, what was the band? Was it grunge? Would we call it grunge?
Yeah, yep,
A female led. Well, it was a female band, but especially like a strong female fronted and female assembled band. That was an important part of, or that should have been an important piece of music history as well. There, right? You know, I'm not saying they were the only female led band, but
no, of
you know,
course,
again, it's like she was torn down in a lot of the press and media outlets when, you know, and look, you know, not saying people doing bad things or behaving badly shouldn't be, but I go back to my previous comment about why do we allow certain bands and rockers and we say, oh, that's a rock and roll lifestyle, but for others we say that's a disgrace and you know they should be
sure.
a role model. So yeah,
And
that's another
like
conversation I think for us.
there's Joan Jett. People talk
Yeah,
about Joan Jett. You know, she's an icon. I like Joan Jett, but I'll be honest. Her biggest hit is a cover. Can you really be an icon if the song you're most known for is a cover song? And I don't think Hart get enough credit. I don't think Ann and Nancy Wilson get enough credit. I don't think Deborah Harry from Blondie gets enough credit. And if like the Runaways, you know, early Joan Jett and Lita Ford in the '70s. So if we're talking about Courtney Love and Hole, like yeah, you want people want like a strong, kick-ass female, and they want a female who isn't going to let herself be boxed in by listen to Hole. There is your female icon. There is your feminist who's fighting back. There is Courtney Love. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. I'm not too aware of her works, other than I think the big song that made it over here was it is it Celebrity Skin?
sure, yep.
Is that the main one? Yeah.
That was the single, and yeah,
What a tune! Well, yeah, I mean, as guests go, like I said, it's always interesting when you get sort of a one that hasn't been said or an unusual one. As well, unusual in that you just never know who's going to pick who. But I think that's a fantastic start. So, okay, so we've got the start. We've got Courtney. She's joined me. She's helping herself to some of the snacks. What is the main course?
the main course. Now, I know I started it kind of highbrow with the caprese skewer and the punch romaine, but sometimes you just got to have classic, good old standard. And I love meat first and foremost, so it's going to be a big cut of steak with sautéed mushrooms and grilled jalapenos.
Oh, nice, nice. You're a man after my own heart here. So you enjoy your steak then, yeah?
Yeah, yes, I do. There's I love food. I love cooking and I love experimenting. But more times than not, just the fattest, juiciest steak with just a few mushrooms, and I'm good. That's all that I need, and I'm content.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, and again, not a thing about your choice, but it doesn't have to be the fanciest of meals, and you don't have to overload the plate. As long as the main attraction is good, I'm set. Just a couple of things on steak. So I tend not to, you know, I love steak, but I tend not to have too much of it because getting it from the supermarket necessarily is over here anyway isn't always going to be the best quality. Am I going to do it justice cooking it myself? And a lot of the restaurants here, again, unless you're going somewhere where you're going to spend a fortune, I do often wonder about the quality. But when I'm on holiday or go to places I know it's going to be great, I'll let myself go. But years ago, probably about 10, 15 years ago, me and my wife were in Argentina.
Okay, big steak place. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was a tour, and the last day we got dropped in Buenos Aires, and so one night we didn't know where to go. So opposite our hotel was this little restaurant. So we go in, proper little. It looked like a family run. This waiter comes out, who was an old gentleman, didn't speak any English, and me and my wife had chosen on the menu what we wanted, and we pointed to it, and he looks at us, and obviously people can't see this, but you know I'll do it for you. He was
Right.
wagging his finger at us. He goes, "No." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Not good, not good." And I said, "All right, what'd you say?" And he pointed at the menu. And we said, "Look," I gave him the menu. I said, "Look, you bring us what you say."
Sure.
Anyway, I can't remember what cut of meat came out, but it was this big, you know, this big chunk of meat. And he holds up two spoons and he's carving it with the spoons to show us how sort of tender it is. And It was far too much for me and my wife to eat, but we ate it all. And the funny thing was, we were leaving the next day, so we had to leave at 2 o'clock to get our flight. This restaurant opened up at 1 o'clock. We were there banging on the door to get in because we wanted it one more time before we went, because we knew we wouldn't have it, a
Sure.
steak like that good when we got back home. So even though we left probably over half of it, we just desperately wanted it that one more time.
Of course, yeah.
Where are you based again? I think you were based in, is it Texas? No.
Texas, yeah.
Texas, yeah.
So,
the steak's good there, right? The meat's good there, yeah.
Yes, California born, and I was born a carnivore, and I came out to Texas, and yeah, it's one of the barbecue havens of the United States. So there is just steak and brisket and hot links galore. It rains from the sky here. But there, if you and your wife, Dan, you come out over to Texas, and you will be living in a plethora of steak dreams.
Is it? Oh, don't. Well, like I said, you know, don't keep saying that because you never know. Is it so barbecue as well? Obviously, is that a big part of your life?
Well, I'm trying to make it one because I did buy a little barbecue last year, bought a little Weber, and I spent 3 days just barbecuing anything I could get my hands on it, just because I wanted to barbecue. So yeah, I love cooking, and barbecue is something I've never really experimented with. But now, thanks to my little Weber, and because, you know, Texas, we have decently okay weather through most of the year, I can, you know, get some charcoal, head on out the back, and have dinner for everyone. And I get to experiment with rubs and flavors and et cetera, et cetera.
Actually, you just answered it there, and that's actually a question I probably should have asked at the start. So you do like cooking yourself, and your household is one where you like to do, because, you know, if we were to base all my knowledge on watching American TV, it's always takeouts. That's all that
and we are a takeout nation. You know, like we are the reason. We're the reason fast food exists in the world, and I'm sorry, okay? This is my apology tour. I'm sorry for fast food. I'm sorry, okay?
But even over here, there's a lot of people say it's either they don't have the time, or they just don't know how to, or they don't want to. But you enjoy making meals from scratch, yeah?
I do, yeah. And, you know, more times than not, like last week, we had a lot of fast food. It was because I don't feel like cooking tonight, or like, oh, I'm going to have to thaw
that happens. That happens, yeah.
But yeah, but more times than not, when the idea sparks, a fire gets lit under me almost. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have to, then we can do this as a side, and I'm going to put this spice in it. If I cook it this way, it'll bring up this flavor, and it's going to be tender, so I'll be able to do this, and then we should, I get into it. So hosting a dinner party is actually kind of one of my personal little passions that I've never got to realize fully.
Well, there you go. We could do this, and then, like I said, give me a year. Maybe I'll be knocking on your door. But my wife, she's wonderful. She makes all our meals. I'm not allowed to cook because I'm the person that I will want to do that dish that has 30 ingredients and will use every item of cutlery and pan and plate in the house. Do you know what I mean? And she knows that there's going to be a mess. And we've moved to a smaller house. We don't have the room. But like I said, I'll see something. I'm saying, yeah, I'm going to make that, not realizing how much effort there's going to be in it.
Right.
Okay. All right. So again, yeah, so far winning menu for me. So who's coming through the door now?
Second guest, keeping on terms of art, would be my favorite artist, H.R. Geiger.
That's a great choice. I only know the obvious, but yes. So sure. Yeah, tell us more then. Yeah.
So H.R. Geiger, if you don't know the name, you definitely know the work, because he is the artist who drew the Alien from the Alien franchise. And a lot of his work is very much a mixture of sensuality, sexuality, organs, and like electronics and machines. And it's this very dark, looming, dystopian, almost Art Deco kind of environment that he creates and draws. And he didn't always start out like that. Initially, H.R. Geiger, when he started, his work was a little more traditional. And with the passing of his first wife, she committed suicide, his art took a turn for the dark. And he would go on to remarry and, have a family. But his first wife the death of her really affected him, and his art style developed into what most people now think of when they think of Geiger. But I am obsessed with Geiger's work from all eras. I love the shape and the detail. I love how looming and how just like intimidating of an artist he is. And if you look at every picture of him, he's always in pure black and he looks very serious and stern. And you look at his art and it's just this very like almost militaristic dystopian science fiction sexuality like piece that you're going, I don't exactly know what I'm looking at, but I can identify some pieces. Or there's one of a bunch of children or tiny humans that are being loaded in the side of a or a gun, and they're lined up in like the clip, and it's just this very violent, aggressive, but also very telling and very compelling pieces of art that he created. And I'm obsessed with Geiger's work. And if we're talking about artists and my dinner being themed to art and how to be an artist and how to survive in an artistic world, I think who better than the man who is, up until his passing, was doing it without any kind of pushback, or if there was pushback, he wasn't paying attention to any.
I'm just having a look at his Wikipedia page now, because again, I will say, yeah, I'll put my hands up. The only thing of his, if you say H.R. Geiger, I will say Alien.
Of course, yeah.
But I mean, what an iconic design that was, right? And that stands the test of time, right? Even if he only ever did that, he probably would have retired or resigned a happy man. But I'm just looking, yeah. So films he's worked on. So obviously all the Aliens, Alien films. Poltergeist is there. Poltergeist 2. He had some involvement in that. Species. This was interesting because it links back to a name you mentioned earlier in your first one, but he's done work for recording artists, and one of those was portraits of Debbie Harry, or Deborah Harry as it's listed here. So yeah, it's fascinating. He did some work on video games, and I think, yes, that's one. I had in my head something else about Geiger, and I couldn't quite remember what. But yeah, he was involved in a game called Darkseid on the Amiga, I think. Yeah, so
his art has been used in so many ways. He also made I don't like Korn, the band, but Jonathan Davis's microphone stand was made by H.R. Geiger.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
If you know what the xenomorph looks like, if you have the idea of what the alien looks like, then you pretty much have the template for how Geiger's art looks. It's very sleek, it's very slim, it has a very monsterish alien quality to it, but it also has these very strange humanistic traits, and it's this mixing of machinery and metal and flesh, and it's very intimidating if you're not used to it, to just see it and think there's something there that really catches you. And then the more you look too, the more you will see in Geiger's larger pictures and paintings.
Yeah, I'm seeing that thing now that you're saying called Birth Machine, which is the gun with the
gun with the kit, yeah.
And yeah, his artwork has been described as biomechanical. Yeah, his art style. Yeah, I mean, obviously go back to the Alien alone. That just stands out in the memory. I mean, when most people, when you think of aliens, it's those elongated arms, the glowing green, those big sort of eyes. This was something different, and yeah, obviously, especially in Alien 3 or 2 with the mouth that comes out. There's obviously, like you said, some sexual connotation with that. But as a design, like you said, it's all sleek. It's very fast moving. It's all smooth surfaces, isn't it? It's something quite unusual.
This is to H.R. Geiger fans. This is going to be old hat to you, but to anyone else, when Fox first approached Geiger for a sketch, like, we want to hire you. Draw the alien. What do you think this thing looks like? His first 2 sketches were rejected because they were too obscene.
Wow.
The executive said, we can't, just, there's no way. So the version of the alien that we see and that we know today is the sketch that was approved by the censors. And
I was going to say PG rated, but it wasn't PG. But yeah, yeah.
And I've seen older versions of the sketch, but obviously there was one where it had an anatomically correct body all the way through. But I don't even think that was the original draft of the Alien, because the few people who have seen the original prints of the Alien said it was one of the most visually disturbing images they'd ever seen. And Geiger was he. I have a book of his actually. It's a shame I can't read it because it's in German. It's his notes working on Alien, and there are parts of it that are transcribed, and the parts that are transcribed are just him bitching about the studio. It's just him like had another argument with it today. They're saying I need to do this. If I don't know why they hired me, if they did, why won't they just let me work? And it's just him complaining about like the
Yeah.
red tape
Yeah.
of the bureaucracy.
It's amazing, isn't it? The stories behind some of the most popular or well-known visual thing, films or music, isn't it? How the journey it gets to the point at which we know it is. You don't often think that there's a whole journey behind it.
Right. And whenever everyone has, oh, I like art and I like Van Gogh and yes, it is easy to love Da
Mm.
Vinci. It is easy to love Canaletto, and it's easy to love these big names, and like there are a million other artists out there, and I'm an Andy Warhol fan. Are you? You like the Campbells? I'm glad. But there are other artists who exist that are just fantastic, and most of their work doesn't go known by the large scale, or it's again H.R. Geiger, hyper famous, mega famous, but the majority of the population only probably know him from the Xenomorph. And his life is, I mean, there's a great documentary made on him about a decade ago. It's called Dark Star, not the movie from the 70s. It's a H.R. Geiger documentary, and at his house he developed a theme park ride in his front yard, and they go through his house, and it's just sketches and paintings and
Mm.
sculptures, and it looks like a hoarder house, but it's all just H.R. Geiger's work. And this is a man who worked obsessively. This is a man who created custom pieces and unique pieces and sets, and he was doing prints and lithographs, and he was doing sculptures and statues, and he was doing vinyl and canvas, and he was drawing, and the breadth of work that H.R. Geiger had, it is shocking to think that if you're not a fan, you only know him from the Xenomorph. And the fact that we know him from such an iconic horror creature that has persisted well past his death, I think that's not even the best of his work, but it shows how lasting his shocking and important his art is.
The interesting thing I was going to say, though, is to most people, I would think, or at least of a generation or of our generations, you say Alien and you think of H.R. Geiger. There are a number of films that I watch and I couldn't tell you who the creative mind behind some of the arts or the visuals you're seeing on screen are, but H.R. Geiger is probably as famous as the Alien franchise,
Probably.
which is unusual, I think, for something like that.
It's very hard to be like a famous artist. You have your Basquiat and you have your Warhol. Unless you're a Renaissance painter like your Da Vinci or your
Mm.
Van Gogh or your, Canaletto or your Monet, um, to be an artist in the 20th century, maybe Ansel Adams, maybe Thomas Kincaid, but for someone to be an art, maybe Ralph Steadman even, but then for someone to be like Geiger, and you're making this dark, looming, depressing, imposing artwork, and it's selling. And he had two museums, and there are H.R. Geiger bars themed around him. And if you don't know H.R. Geiger's work, but you have something that is done by H.R. Geiger, I think anyone can go, that looks like the dude who does the alien stuff. And he has a very distinctive art, and it's hard for an artist to get known to that level.
Yeah, it's just something that hit me when we were thinking is that why do we reference him but we don't any other artists in films? Before I move on, just again to show that everything feels like it's linking up. So again, to go back to something we were talking at right at the start. So just having a look at his page again, and there's an entry called the Geiger Bar. And a Geiger bar is a bar themed and modelled by the Swiss artist H.R. Geiger. There are two. One is in Switzerland, and the other is they're both in Switzerland. Sorry, The interior of the bars are themed along lines of his biomechanical style, as shown in the Alien films. The roof walls, fittings, and chairs are all modelled by the artist and fit into the same designs as seen in the films he designed, notably Alien. And this is where I get to the point that we link up. The prominent high-backed Harkonnen chair design was originally intended as a Harkonnen throne for an abandoned Dune film project. There you go. So it's all linking up. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, again, what a wonderful set of guests we've got so far. So before I ask you what your dessert is, are you a dessert person?
Yes.
You are?
I am.
Yeah, excellent.
It's weird picking my dessert now, having answered just yes, because I love cheesecake, and I'm a pie guy over cake. I prefer pies over cakes, a blueberry pie or raspberry pie.
I'm with you.
But for this dessert, for this dinner party, since we're talking about art, and I've got Courtney Love and H.R. Geiger and Dan, I think, and we had caprese skewers with some punch romaine. We had some wine and some steak. I think that I'm going to keep it on this higher out, and instead of traditional dessert, I'm going to bring out a platter of cheeses and wines to pair with.
Oh, classic. Over here, that is a valid choice on a menu in a restaurant for a dessert. The whole cheese board. So, do you like specific types of cheeses? And what I mean by that is we've just come through at time recording. We just had Christmas and New Year, and me and my wife, we tend not to treat ourselves to like all the variety of cheeses through the year. Just plain cheddar for my sandwiches at work, boring. But we do splurge a bit at Christmas, and we love blue cheese. When you say that to people, it's like, oh no. But I love trying those and the flavour you get. So do you like trying some of these kind of like more fanciful cheeses?
Blue cheese is actually one of my favorite cheeses. I like a blue cheese. I like Munster. I like Gouda. I will try. I actually recently had I can't remember the kind of cheese it was, but it was I think it was a coffee rubbed brie.
Okay, wow, yeah.
And then I had another one that was wine infused.
Okay, yeah.
And so I am all I love it. And there's a part of me that I've been saying this for a few years now. I am a rich person stuck with a poor person's wallet.
Yeah,
like if I could, my natural tastes, if I could, I would spend $300 on wine. I would spend $500 on a nice piece of art that brings me joy. I would spend these high ticket things. So, me trying to hold up to my own personal standards of taste, that's why I only drink single origin whiskeys that are 10 years old, because they're not too expensive. And I personally enjoy the flavor of them more. So when I go for cheeses, I'm always looking at region and how old and does this have age and what could I pair this with, and would this go good with a summer sausage, or maybe I get some, what kind of mustard can I pair with this, or do I what kind of crackers should I put on this? And so I definitely fall into that line.
The descriptions of cheeses are wonderful as well, aren't they?
Some of them are a little strange because I don't think I'm learning to appreciate wine. I want to try to get my Somm license, right? So I have to get my number 1, then 2, then 3. So I'm just trying to get my toe in the wine world. And some of the descriptions of the wines, I'm like, I know someone out there this makes sense to. To me, I am not sophisticated enough. I don't have the palate to understand what this means. And that's how I feel like when I look at cheeses sometimes. Because I'm like, I know the cheese name. I know the region, but there are 6 words in a row that I don't know how they mean. What does that mean in context of cheese? What does that mean?
Yeah, and it is funny how we've turned an ingredient that is a savoury into a really valid and enjoyable dessert option.
If you've ever had cheese, and I don't mean like a Kraft single, but if you've had like room temperature brie, and you've just had a little bit, and it's not, oh, this is cheese. It's, oh, this is kind of bitter, but kind of sweet, and then it melts, and that is a dessert. It has all the qualities of a dessert, which is why I think I think it's becoming more of a thing over here now where like a cheese board is an acceptable dessert because the properties of cheese are sweet, savory. A lot of them have like a melt in your mouth texture quality, which is close to chocolate, which is why you can pair cheese and chocolate very
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And I think it just works.
Well, as you said, and crackers as well, and you get some of them can have a sweetness to the crackers as well, so
Sure.
you're having that. So yeah, wonderful combination. I mean, yeah, we yeah we ate a lot of cheese. So look, so firstly, as a complete menu, yeah, that's a winner. I'd be having that. I'd be having that. I'm coming over. I'm coming over. You see, this is just again another test to see whose house and what order I go round.
Right, of
Yeah.
course.
Okay, so for your final guest, who's coming through the door?
Final guest, personal favorite artist of mine. It's Tom Waits.
Okay,
It's
okay.
got to be Tom Waits. Tom Waits is the closest that I think any of the beat writers ever got to being musicians. Tom Waits is so full of witticism, and he once said, "I love Burroughs because everything that comes out of him is already whiskey." And I feel that same way about Tom Waits. If you listen to his earlier stuff, Swordfish Trombones, Closing Time, Rain Dogs, even the later stuff, Mule Variations, Bone Machine, Tom Waits has these lines, these lyrics that are just so. There's always free cheddar in a mousetrap. That's a great line. Large print giveth, small print taketh away. Like there are just these great humanistic lines, like God's away on business. That entire song, and Chocolate Jesus when he starts out with "I found a chocolate confection." It's an immaculate confection. It's just these great like rhyming schemes or wordplay, and it invokes these fantastic images of almost a bygone era. Like Tom Waits, I equate him with the beat writers of the 50s, and I equate them with like the great American hobo of the 20s that doesn't exist anymore. I if you listen to Tom Waits' early stuff, Cold Cold Ground, Frank's Wild Years, you'll just hear these great pieces of Americana songwriting that outside of them being great pieces of Americana, they're just these real hitting. Like everything that Tom Waits writes is almost like Bukowski writing again. It just makes so much sense. It's so visceral, and he does it in 3 minutes and 25 seconds. And it's the music itself is great and fantastic. And Tom Waits has this amazing perspective on the world. Heath Ledger modeled his Joker off of Tom Waits interviews, and there's a great
Okay.
Tom Waits interview where he's sitting down and he's smoking and he looks a little absent-minded, and the host asks him something, and Tom Waits goes, "Well, I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy." And it's like that's such a great. I don't. I wish I'd thought of that. Like there are just
Yeah,
so
yeah.
many lines that Tom Waits has created that I'm like, that is the perfect distillation of a human quality or a human emotion, or like
Yeah, yeah.
I will never not be impressed by his songwriting. And again, if this dinner is themed around art and artists, many people I think write Tom Waits off because of how he sounds. His voice is not for everyone, and I totally understand that. If you don't know who Tom Waits is, you've probably seen him in movies. He was in Mystery Men as the inventor. He was in Renfield in the '90s Dracula movie, or he was Renfield in the '90s Dracula movie. He is Neller in the movie Wristcutter's Love Story. So Tom Waits has been in tons of movies. He's even in a movie called Coffee and Cigarettes, and he has a scene with Iggy Pop where they're discussing coffee and cigarettes in a diner. But Tom Waits' music, I'd really recommend anyone go listen to his earlier stuff and then skip the album Real Gone because I think it's lackluster in comparison, but pick up something like Mule Variations or Bone Machine or Frank's Wild Years, Swordfish Trombones. Like the piano has been drinking, but not me. That's a great line and that's a great song. Like the rug needs a shower and the chairs are upset and the piano has been drinking but not me, and it's so good. It's just so like classy but dirty and just full of humanistic qualities that just can sum up life in 3 minutes and 25 seconds.
See, this is a really interesting choice because I know Tom Waits, but I'd be lying if I could sing you any of his work. Like I said, I know it, but I was just looking here now, and yeah, his musical career was 40 odd years, and yeah, his filmography, even though a lot of it's bit parts, again, that's it, and he's still going in films. I
Yeah,
mean, he's got one coming out this year, or a voice in a film, and two coming out or that are in post production now. Yeah, I did spot Bram Stoker's Dracula because again, that's kind of linked to your Mind Wipe episode because
sure. Yep.
we discussed that. But yeah, he's
He's
just in
Renfield
so
in that,
much.
and he's a great Renfield in that.
Yeah, yeah.
He eats up every scene he's in as Renfield. Asta, the pretty girl, Matt, and it's just he does such a good Renfield because he's so over the top, and he is just so like inherently cool. And initially, when I first heard Tom Waits early years, I was like, this I don't like it. Why? Ugh. And then as I got older, I'm like, oh, fuck, Tom Waits is pretty cool. And like Cold Ground, 16 shots from a 30-06. I Don't Want to Grow Up, which the Ramones covered. Frank's Wild Years, the song itself, and Frank's Wild Years alone is a song. It's almost like something Larry David would write. It's not really a
Yeah,
song. It's more like spoken
yeah,
word, like
yeah.
Frank hanging a nail through his head on his wife, and it's just this like 1 minute story about this dude who works as an insurance salesman at 2.5%, and his wife made pretty good Bloody Marys and kept her mouth shut most of the time, and it's just this great little like snapshot of this amazing life, and it's almost like again, it feels like this is a Seinfeld bit or this is a Larry David thing, and Frank's Wild Years, the song is just hilarious. It's like satire and it's sardonic, but it's genius. It just is genius. And I last week I was listening to a bunch of Tom Waits, just reminding myself like, how come one, he's not bigger? Like, why don't more people listen to him? But two, it's also this thing of like, there are some musicians who people forget until you say their name, and then they go,
Yes.
oh man, they're a genius.
Yeah.
Brian Eno, Danny Elfman, Tom Waits. There are just these musicians who are like everyone seems to forget about, but as soon, and especially other musicians too. When other musicians are like, "Oh yeah, no, that guy, they're a genius," and then like there's something special, and that's Tom Waits all over.
I think, yeah, you hit the nail on the head there is why some people aren't more famous because, like I said, I'm not going to say I'd be able to reel off his music, but his name always crops up when they're talking about, sort of, either music greats
Artistes,
or, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, his name is always there, but people necessarily won't know him. So, yeah, it's a funny, again, yeah, you've got me thinking it's a funny world we live in sometimes in terms of what does become either like music or celebrity burns bright but fast, as opposed to those that are constantly there in the background putting out these great
sure.
pieces of art. Yeah. So the question I ask normally at the end of this is, do you think? So we're all there in the house. Do you think the guests will get along? Now, don't mind me because I get on with everyone.
So actually, I do think they would get along because I think Courtney Love, there might be wine and the punch romaine, but we're not dealing with cameras, and no one is trying to antagonize her. No one's
Mm,
asking her about Kurt. No one's throwing her a million questions a mile. So Courtney gets to be in a controlled environment with just two other musicians or two other artists who are serious about their work. And I think in that environment, Courtney really shines. I think she could really have stuff to talk about. And I think she could talk about her own experiences in music and her own journey. And again, I've picked three guests who it's all centered around me just trying to absorb as much knowledge from these three as possible because Tom Waits and H.R. Geiger and Courtney Love have all made it their own way. You don't like Tom. Oh, Tom Waits sucks. His voice is gross. Yeah, but he's been doing music regularly for 40 years and getting acting roles. So he's obviously not trash. H.R. Geiger, you only know him from Alien. You only know him from Alien, one of the biggest horror franchises of all. He also continued work constantly. Courtney Love crops up every couple of years, and her last album, which was 24 years ago, is fantastic. Like, these are people who are incredibly talented and in some way or another have been overlooked by pop culture media. even with Geiger getting Alien, even with Tom Waits being in Mystery Man and Dracula, the pop culture right now does not know these names, right? A 20-year-old doesn't know the name Tom Waits, doesn't know H.R. Geiger, doesn't know Courtney Love. A 25-year-old might, depending on the kind of circles they move in, artistically speaking. So I think all three of them could very easily have an electric conversation about the way the industry works or worked, or the way the industry is going, and how it doesn't, you don't need to stay relevant to what an A&R man thinks. You don't need to appease an audience. You just have to find your audience. And I think that there's a lot to be gained from that.
You know, we've only spoken a few times. So I want to say, having got to know you, the few times we have spoken, we've had fantastic conversations. And the guests, to me, pretty much, I will not say sum you up, but I can see that how fitting they are choice from you, because art is extremely important to you, and more so the stories behind it. And I think those people you've chosen are just so symbolic of, whether you like them or not, icons in their fields, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're not going away. Even after they die, H.R. Geiger has passed, and he is still highly regarded and respected. He has not gone away. They just made Alien Romulus, and they have no designs to change the way the xenomorph looks. You know, Courtney Love has a new album coming out, and I'm sure that when it comes out, I'm sure it's going to make a wave somewhere. Tom Waits, he hasn't done an album for a while, that's fine, but he's still getting roles. So in some way or another, these artists aren't going away.
That's a sign of, a great mind, isn't it? Or a great artist, is the longevity that they have, and adapting to the changing times as well, isn't it? Like I said, 50 years on, and Tom is still doing films, right?
Yeah.
he's still in films. So,
and his music sounds timeless. Because it has such a he does not. It's a mixture of lounge singer, like trash can fire hobo, and like crooner. And then in 2000, like the Bone Machine album, he gets almost like industrial, or he gets almost experimental, or almost indie with it. He gets almost, you can never stick on a Tom Waits album and go, man, this sounds like it was made in the 70s, or this sounds dated. It's just the way Tom Waits has developed his sound and his music and his voice to be, any decade, it doesn't matter, it's always going to be good, because the lyrics and the music are so just, the music might be quirky, there might be some songs or some instruments or some melodies or harmonies or arrangements that seem quirky, and then Tom Waits his voice is very take it or leave it, and I understand that. But if you listen to his lyrics and then you add all of that together, it's like, this dude is Bukowski, this guy is Burroughs, he is a beat poet and a hobo. If those guys made music in the 70s and 80s and 90s, that is Tom Waits.
Good lyrics will always be good lyrics, right? Music may change or music may date, but the lyrics in this song is ultimately what makes it, right? And and they will always, be what they are. So, okay, got a few other questions to throw at you. So we've had our meal, but what would be playing? So what album would you be playing during the meal?
So this is hard, because now I have to impress people. I have to impress you, Dan, obviously. And then I have to impress three.
You've just served me steak and cheese. You don't need to. I'm already a fan. Yeah.
I have to impress Tom Waits, H.R. Geiger, and Courtney Love. Three radically different people with three radically different tastes. I'm sure Courtney would love to hear the Pixies. I'm sure Geiger would love to hear something a little classical, maybe something from his era, right? And I'm sure Tom Waits would love to hear some jazz, maybe some Thelonious Monk, but I have to pick something that I also, like, what could I do? What could fit in? So I think the safe bet, to not offend anyone musically, I would have to choose Iggy and the Stooges' Raw Power.
Okay.
From 73. The MC5 Kick Out the Jams EP. And then it's a little bit punky, it's a little bit rock, because that's kind of the time. But it's also a dinner party. So there has to be a little bit of like melody in there. So maybe I throw on something by the Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Okay, wow, that's a pick. Yeah.
Maybe like Night Castle or something from Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
And I know how difficult it must have been to whittle it down to just a handful
It really was, because I'm also trying to play, well, it's a dinner party, so I can't do Iron Maiden, Motorhead, I can't do Gogo
Why
Bordello.
not? Go for it. Yeah.
But it wouldn't be right in this setting, especially with the people.
Yeah.
I would never do that to Tom Waits and H.R. Geiger. I'd never be like, hey, you guys want to listen to Motorhead? I would, and I would never be like, hey, Courtney Love, do you want to listen to some experimental gypsy punk? I mean, I'm sure she'd love it, but it's time and place. And especially Tom Waits. I wouldn't be like, hey, Tom, I got Gogo Bordello for you. So I think the safe bet is choosing MC5 for Geiger and Courtney Love, Iggy and the Stooges, because there's already a connection there between Tom Waits and Iggy Pop, and Courtney Love. And then I think Trans-Siberian Orchestra for Geiger and Waits, because I feel like the instrumentation of the music itself would be enough for them to appreciate what they're hearing.
And you explain all that has sort me of an extra question that I know you don't know, but I'm going to ask you now. And this could be a mean question, but your three guests, you get the right to write a book about one of them. Which one is it and why?
Ooh. Okay, well, H.R. Geiger is off the table because books have already been written about him by people who know infinitely more. I'm not the H.R. Geiger biographer, so his story has already been told by people. So it's between Courtney Love and Tom Waits. I am a writer, but I'm not like Tom Waits as a writer. Tom Waits can write his own story, and I think he can do it in only a way that Tom Waits can, and I think that whatever he writes would be infinitely better than whatever I could write if I was transcribing. So I think I could do Courtney Love justice, because I'm genuinely fascinated by Courtney Love, and I'm honestly and genuinely a fan of Courtney Love. And I think that society at large has done her a huge disservice, especially the media outlets, always these pointed questions and trying to egg her on for a reaction and just treating her badly. I think that without the lights, without the cameras, talking to Courtney Love, hey, what kind of music do you like? What inspired you? As the years have gone on, has your taste in music changed? What do you as a person feel like your place as a woman in the modern music industry? Do you think, like, I have all these questions that I would ask her. And she's writing a new album now, and she is getting some contemporaries of the music genre to work, like, of the music world to work with her. And I think that shows, a willingness that most celebrities her age don't have. And then also an awareness of, hey, there are some really good current singer-songwriters and musicians out there who I want to work with. And I think that shows a maturity that other people don't also think Courtney Love is aware of. So I would love to sit down and tell Courtney's story in a way that does her correctly.
Courtney, if you're listening, or if anyone knows Courtney... Or if you're listening to this, let's get this out to Courtney. You absolutely will do justice to that. So, like I said, I love your passion for this stuff. So, okay, couple more. What film would we watch? So, I always frame it that we've had the meal. I'm probably going to start dozing, so I've eaten too much. I always do. What film would you make us watch? Say, look, if you want to get to know Griffin a little bit better, watch this film.
No one's going to want to come to my dinner party, because the movie I would pick, it's really a choice between one or two, and one of them is just way too dark to stick on. So I think I'm going to go with Taxi Driver.
Okay.
I think Taxi Driver is the movie I'd put on.
So obviously a favourite of yours. Again, an iconic film, right?
Yeah.
What would the other choice be then?
The other one was going to be Apocalypse Now.
Oh, okay. Wow, yeah.
But again, too dark, too weird and esoteric for a dinner party.
But I was going to say, and I mean this in a good way, I can see why they're your films, because they are very, like, the visuals and the artistic merit in those films as well, like sort of the Taxi Driver. I can see why that they appeal to you, yeah.
The only reason why I like Joker, and I like Joker Folie d'Or, I enjoyed the sequel too, it's because I really like Taxi Driver. And Joker is basically a remade version of Taxi Driver. And people were complaining about the Joker sequel, like, oh, he's not really Joker. That's the whole point. That is the whole point. He neglects it. It is a role that was thrust upon him. It like the Arthur Fleck character. That's a whole other conversation. But I was really satisfied with the second Joker movie. But it all comes back because I love Taxi Driver so much. There are a few movies out there that I just cling to, and they're not happy movies. Like Apocalypse Now, Taxi Driver, Train Spotting. Like, these are not happy-go-lucky movies. These aren't movies to like inspire you. They're kind of depressing. They're kind of dark. But there's just something about the characters or the setting and the environment that I resonate with, or that resonates with me so much that I'm like, this. I need more of it. I want more of it. You know.
But we'll get off point again here. But a film for me or a show doesn't have to be happy. It can be dark. It's got to make you feel something, whether that feeling is happiness and fun,
But
or
not
if it
for a
can
dinner
be
party,
sadness.
Dan. It's a
Sorry?
dinner party. But not for a dinner party. I can't
Yeah, but
it'd be like, all right, everyone, we're gonna have a dinner party. There's gonna be lobster and this and that. And by the way, we're gonna watch Schindler's List.
yeah, but you're
Like,
gonna bust the
it's-
twister out afterwards. Let's say that we'll bust the twister out, and I've got one more. I had two, but I don't know whether to merge them or change them slightly. All right, the one I want to ask you is there a dining establishment or a pub, let's say a pub or an eatery in a show or a movie that you would want to eat in?
God, too many. Too many. This is gonna be really the movie Chef, starring John Favreau and John Leguizamo, their Cuban sandwich truck. I'd like to hit that up. This is going to be really grim, so there's going to have to be a few caveats with it. But Hannibal Lecter, like from the TV show, any of the time that he is cooking food and then serving the food to people, I'm like, looks really good. And so the caveats are, one, it'd have to be unhuman. It would have to be an animal of some kind. And I would have to know in my heart of hearts, but also like visibly see animal. Because I know that choosing Hannibal Lecter is like that joke in the show when Jack Crawford's eating. He's like, "What's this?" Hannibal goes, "Rabbit," and Jack's like, "He should have hopped faster." And then it cuts to a clip of a dude running through the woods, and Hannibal's like, "He should have," and I'm like, "Oh."
I love the choices there. So you've got did you say a Cuban sandwich truck?
It's a Cuban sandwich truck, yeah.
And Hannibal Lecter's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Hannibal also puts in the effort when you see him cook, and then he has a presentation, and he has the knowledge of cooking and spices and flavor.
Yeah,
So he has that sophistication and that pomposity that is a part of me. As much as there are parts of me that I am a snob, when it comes to music and art and movies, I definitely have a snob about it, and Hannibal kind of scratches that. But at the same time, I'll also eat taco trucks, and I'll eat $2 burritos, and, I love street food. So either one of those.
And I think that's the perfect place actually to leave this conversation. What a wonderful couple of choices right at the end. Look, thank you for coming on. And like I said, this is always a good thing because now I know, if I am ever passing, I'm definitely knocking on your door. Like I said, it's been wonderful talking to you again. So we will be linking up again. I've got no doubt of that. But before we go again, do you just want to shout out where people can find you and your work, please?
So if anyone is interested in more of the personality, you can find me on the Reboot Deboot podcast, and that is where my friend and I, we watch movies and their remakes and rebooted franchises, and then we compare, contrast, and analyze them side by side. And we're on Good Pods, we're on Anchor/Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, wherever podcasts live. That is the Reboot Deboot podcast. You can also find me on Twitch every Monday through Thursday at twitch.tv/TheRenegadeChester.
In the show notes, I will put the link to our previous couple of episodes actually, because I think they are very different. And like I said, I always get a lot of good comments when you've been on, so I will put those in there. So again, thank you for coming on. For me, you're listening to me, so you know where to find the podcast. But if you fancy coming on doing one of these, if you want to give me an idea for an episode theme, or if you just want to say hi, search for Casting Views across all social media, or drop me an email at castingviewspod@gmail.com. Otherwise, all that's left to say is I will be back next week for another episode of Casting Views.
1, 2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, check what we've got, 'cause you need it. Don't make us get a spark and proceed it. Come on.